All right, welcome everybody to tonight's Ask Me Anything webinar. My name is Ricky. I'm the head of education and chief product officer at ID Tech, who runs ID Tech camps, ID Teen Academies, and our online private lessons. I'm at my home right now, so if you hear some kids, I'm a proud father. We live in Arizona, and I'm love to be part of the team, but I've been working with ID Tech since 2006. This will be my 19th summer, running awesome programs for students all around the country. With me today is, I feel like I can say friend, is Trey Roski of BattleBots. Trey, we're so glad you're here.
Thank you. Glad to be here. I'm excited.
Yeah, so Trey, let's rather than me reading a paragraph here, which I could, I'd love to hear, let's go a little bit origin story here. Tell me the maybe like the 2-minute version, how you and BattleBots, robotics, and engineering all kind of came to be, the short version, I guess.
The short version. That's
Yeah.
tough.
Good luck.
I mean, I started as a contestant. So we started as builders, and that has always been something in our mind. Greg and I've always kind of looked at everything. Cousin Greg's my cousin. We both built a lot of things as kids, and destroyed a lot of things as kids. And this was just kind of the next knack. Um, and it was we went to Robot Wars, and Greg had gone in '94. He invited me to come with him in '95. We built a robot with Gage Cashwa called La Machine. Built a middleweight robot. It was 80 pounds, beat 160-pound robots that year. So it beat all the robots that were still alive in a melee. So there was, I think there were 8 or more other robots that we ended up stacking on top of each other and left smoking in the corner, and got hooked. And a lot of stuff happened with Robot Wars. Sold it to the BBC eventually, or helped bring it on TV there. And there was some arguing that went on with the guys that thought it up, and we decided to start our own and do it for the contestants, by the contestants, and try to make it as a place that we would like to play. And we've kind of gotten to that point, and still working it, still loving it. Absolutely. It's the
That's
short
awesome.
version.
Yeah, that is a short version. Obviously, people have seen you on television, on YouTube, and you're all over Instagram now and all these different mediums. You also, though, I'm seeing kind of some background stuff here. You guys have a home now in Las Vegas, right?
We do. We have a permanent home in Vegas. We've done up to 10 shows a week. Most weeks we're doing, 5 shows, 7 shows, something like that. Kind of depends. Spring break is really big for us. Today is a great night. We've got a good turnout showing up, and it's a great show. And we also have face-offs on certain weekends, proving grounds on certain weekends, and we have contestants that come out and just practice and try out their new ideas or new wheels or some new robot design, that they want to check out. We had the Hypershot guys there with a brand new robot a few weeks ago that
Really?
they wanted to try out, and it was great. And they came and competed in the nightly show. So it's a really exciting show. I'm very proud of it. I really, might sound a little, because it's our show, but I think it's the best show in Vegas. If we've had a lot of fans that have come in that are locals in Vegas, like Donny Osmond, which is an old school singer that's
Yeah.
still doing it. He's been there. We've had Rick Rubin there. These are just super fans. Chris Angel comes a lot. So anytime there's somebody cool there, he shows up with his kids and wife. And so there's a lot of locals and some famous musicians. The Smashing Pumpkins
That's
guy
really cool.
came, and they just love the show. They're secret admirers. So I encourage that.
Not anymore.
Yeah.
You didn't take any pumpkins in the box, did you?
Not yet, but that idea did come across. He did mention that.
If you had known, maybe ahead
Yeah.
of time. No, that's awesome. Yeah, I've actually been out there to see it twice now, and it's really fun. It's infectious. It feels good, and I think it's part of the reason why BattleBots resonates with young people, is that it's robots and they're fighting and things get broken. And tell me about that a little bit. So I know there's some really cool robotics camps around. Um, tell me just a little bit about how you feel about robotics with combat being involved and how you feel that's something special for all ages.
So I think the violence in BattleBots, because it is violent, is really the hook. It is what inspires people to go to. I think it's a relatively simple task. There's other competitions out there, as you know, the First and Vex and all that, and all of us are trying to do the same thing to a certain extent. We're all trying to educate kids, educate ourselves, and have fun doing it. But the simplicity of survival is what I think BattleBots gives or does. It's actually a simple task: survive. If you can survive, you're probably going to win. If you can survive and make the other robot not survive, then you're definitely going to win. So it's kind of a relatively simple task. There is some instinct in us, I believe, for some reason that people want to see violence. There's people watch fake wrestling. I look at that and I scratch my head and I go, it's fake. Why do you want to watch it? They're not even really, they're hurting each other to a certain extent. They're hurting themselves. I mean, they go jumping off the ropes and spin around and bang their
Yeah.
head and, or whatever. So there is an athleticism to it that is, for fake wrestling or real wrestling and all that. They're real athletes. But it to me, I want to see something that's real. I do like to see, something with conclusion, without guilt. You watch a car race, you kind of want the car to crash, but you feel guilty when that happens. You feel like you wanted it and maybe you wished it, and here the car crashed, and then you feel guilty, and then you feel better when hopefully the driver gets out and walks out, and they
Right.
okay, and you're relieved or whatever. So it gives you that without the guilt, so you don't have to feel bad about it. So I think that's a big part of it. And there's no end to what you can create. It's almost like when you finish a car race, for example, you kind of, I don't know, if you could rebuild the car every time and make it better, wouldn't which is what they do anyway. They
Yeah.
when they take their cars, their F1 cars or their Daytona cars, and they try to make them better, and they do whatever they're going to do to the engine, and they make them better, and hopefully win the next race if they didn't win this one, or continue to win. And that's what the competition of BattleBots does. There's always something better you could make. There's always something you can try. Even Jameson with his robot that won last season, he's making it better. He came and played with it a couple months ago at one of the proving grounds, and it's looking better. So
Yeah.
that's part of the whole game.
You actually took one of my questions here. I think there's something powerful, when a student comes to one of our camps this summer. You and I saw this, Trey, Greg, and I, we were all out at our Stanford location, and we saw this one battle. How long did it last? 2 seconds? There was just a fatal flaw to the design. In the offense on the other bot was made to beat the other person's defense. Like it was just like worst case scenario. But immediately, while there was this moment of disappointment, it sparked this like, let's go pick up our bot. And those three students picked it up, took it back to the toolbox, and started working on fixing it. And I think there's something, I mean, there's a life skill there, right?
Absolutely. And, they came back, if you remember, and won the next fight, which was, true awe-inspiring. They won the next fight. Then they went back and fixed it again and added some other idea to it. I mean, that just seeing the brain work, and seeing the kids and everybody that competes in these events, how they come up with, their next idea, or how they fix their problem and how it evolves. So even if they win, they've got a better idea, or they got a better way of doing it, or a different way of doing it, and seeing how that works, and seeing how they're thinking through the competition while it's happening. And that inspiration, we just don't, there's not enough of that in our society. There isn't enough of things where you can think through and create it, and go build it and test it and then make it better. There's just not enough of that in school or education or anything. And that just makes all this, the brains mechanical or not mechanical, but, electric, moving around, it just makes it all work.
All the signals are firing in there. And
Signals, yeah, exactly.
it's one of the things. So just a little inside baseball here, behind the curtain, whatever your metaphor of choice is. When we got together a couple years ago with this idea, um, our robotics courses, we didn't really have the kids battle. And it was a very core piece to the course. And you and your team absolutely stuck to your principles on it. You're like, no, this is a way to do it. And I think what's interesting is now that we have a course that has this, I feel like I'm finding myself wanting to like capture the energy of this class in a bottle and like put it in all of our other courses as well. It's really special, and it is frenetic but calculated. It is chaotic but organized all at the same time. And it is something really unique. Tell me a little bit. So you obviously know the course. As I was a little shocked the first time that we submitted curriculum over to the BattleBots team, and I showed up in person, and Trey said, I was reading through every line of your curriculum. But tell me, so when a student comes, what are some of the concepts that maybe I always like to say we have this BattleBots. Um, you're building a bot and you're battling, and that is what kind of hooks the student. But inside of this, they're actually learning what? Like, what would you say they're actually taking away?
They're learning so much. I mean, there's so much there that I think when this was all thought of at the beginning, that we didn't realize we were going to be teaching. That I don't think I detected, realizes how much they're learning, beyond building the robot, beyond figuring out how to, make it survive, beyond how to, conquer who you're going up against, because everybody has a different idea, and you're going up against somebody else in the next round. Beyond all that, they're learning how to communicate. They're learning how to work together. This is something that's not taught in school. In school, they normally go and it's like, here's a math test or a math equation. Who's going to get the A? Who's going to get the F? Who's going to get the C? And you're pitted against your peers in a combative way. However, you never learn to work together, which in the future, any company, anybody that's going to hire you is going to want to have you work together, have you work as a team. If they're hiring, a bunch of dozen people or whatever to work on a project, they want you to work together. They don't want you to fight over who's done what, or who's better, or who's smarter, or who's going to get the A, or who's going to get. They want you to work together, and that's something that I think that kids don't always get, and adults don't always get.
Yeah.
There's so much to that. There's so much budgeting that goes on that you don't think about. Like, you never think about, I'm going to build a robot. You don't think about budgeting your time. The parts you have available. The time is a big one. You go to start that robot, and you might have a great idea or whatever, and then you get to the point where maybe they give you an hour, 2 hours a day, whatever it is, to put that together. But then you realize you haven't accomplished that, or you haven't finished it, or something doesn't work the way you thought it might. You don't have the traction, the wheel isn't big enough to fit in there. All the little things that happen that you just don't realize until you get into that. And the success, the feeling of doing something and being successful at it. And that is, I think, the most important part, technically, at least in my opinion.
Yeah.
The reward isn't winning the fight. The reward is having your robot go in there and move around. You've succeeded at that point, and you feel good about yourself, and you can do better. So even if you lose that, you've got a new idea or you want to change it, that feeling of success, we don't have enough of that in our society. We need to feel good about ourselves, and building something or creating something and have it just move is truly a success, and it's a feel good thing. And we need to encourage people and find things that people can do and kids can do that they feel better about that in themselves for doing that. And I think that's one of the biggest things. And then there's just a dozen other little things that they get out of this that they don't realize. Math, how do I figure this out? Even the little stuff, it suddenly makes math make sense. It suddenly makes all that education they've tried to put in us in school make sense. We're building something, we're creating it, we're taking notes. Why do we do this? And I think that's just some of the greatest parts.
It's when you and I got together last month, you actually were talking about, all right, I want to sneak more math in where they're getting it and they may not even realize it. And I have these ideas for ways that we can make it exciting and different. And it's so cool. There really is so much to unpack there. I feel like we could talk about all the hidden benefits forever, but um, yeah, one of the biggest ones for me is as a parent, all these games are kind of giving this almost like faux dopamine hits of like, I love Minecraft, don't get me wrong. I think it's a really cool game. But a day does not last very long. And you get one click and you can often get something. And so then you get this like fake feel good rush. And that's why it's so hard for kids to disengage from video games. But to get those kind of feelings in a real environment with real friends that you've made that are kids that like things like you do, that are interested in things like you like, and to have those success of, like you said, even just getting it to connect to the controller and drive, that's a win. And it really, I think there's an emotional piece to that that's so good for students. This last year we opened up, we originally did this for like 10 to 12 year olds, and then the teenagers had two different courses. And we actually opened this up for 7 to 9 year olds in a slightly different course, mainly because so many parents kept being like, I have a 9 year old and they're just dying to get in here. Um, but I don't know, it's one of the things I love about this course is the way that we're opening up for those opportunities for kids to, it is probably the most get off the computer course we have in our portfolio. It's up there with like our video courses where they're running around with cameras on campus. And I think it's fantastic. And we certainly have computer time. They're learning some code. They're learning to make things work on the computer. You have to have it, but it's I don't know, it's a cool blend. I love it. I'm gonna real quick, since we're at the 20-minute mark. We have a Q&A section turned on in this webinar. So down at the bottom of your screen, it may be under the 3-dot more thing for you if you're on a phone or tablet, but we have a Q&A widget turned on, and we would love for you to put questions in there. And we will try to get to as many as we can. We already have a couple in there, and we'll tackle those as they come through. But I did want to, just as a housekeeping, go ahead and let everybody know that here in a couple minutes, we'll be switching over to your questions, which is sad because I think mine are pretty good. But anyway, um, so, one of the things people ask about, and Trey, just to kind of talk about the camp for a little bit here, and the camp that we've made. I think what makes it unique and what a day is, obviously there's competitive elements. Even in a moment of competition, there may be a moment of like, it didn't perform like we wanted, or the claw didn't activate, we've got to go fix it. I think the opportunity to improve and all of that makes it a positive experience. So I know some parents may be worried, like, hey, my kid does not like losing. Are they going to be able to succeed? So, Trey, you've seen a camp firsthand a couple times. You've seen multiple battles at camp. Like, do you worry about that with kids and bots?
There was, a couple fights that I saw some emotion, come on, some of the kids that they had lost. And they got real emotional, and, it was short-lived because, right after the emotion started and they bounced back in, they came up with this idea and they ended up winning, which, that's what it's about. That's, there's so much more success in trying, and we all have ups and downs in life is about ups and downs. Who knows what's going to happen, day-to-day basis, and you need to be able to absorb the blows, and that's a BattleBots term,
Yeah.
and accept the rewards, and success is, there's a lot of planning in winning. There's a lot of planning in the success, and there's a lot of learning in a loss. And
Yeah.
you just need to use that, absorb it, take it in, and keep trying. And I think that's, a big lesson in life is we got to keep trying, never give up, keep trying, and eventually you figure it out. I'll bounce back to Jameson Go. I mean, I think he competed 17 years or something like that before he ended up winning,
Really?
been doing this forever. Yeah. But he finally won and he stuck with it. And he finally took it to the limit. And his robot and his design, he stuck with it. He kept perfecting it, and eventually look where it took him. So
Yeah. To raise the trophy.
gave the giant nut.
And I think, and even if he didn't, I bet the journey, all the people, you were talking to me about that,
Yeah.
just the teams, but even between the teams, the engineers, the drivers, the way that they all get to know each other. And obviously we're a smaller version of what you see there, but the community it creates is pretty unique.
The best friends you'll ever get are, from this kind of a camp, from, coming to the BattleBots, competing in the BattleBots competition. It is unbelievable. I mean, I don't know another thing out there where you meet people like this, and they end up becoming your friends and your friends forever. And, the respect, the camaraderie, people in the pits are always helping each other. Doesn't matter if you're going up against them in the next fight and you really want to win. Maybe it's the final fight. They're helping each other. They're saying, here, let me get down. I remember with La Machine when it had lost, its second year, and everybody was there helping us, giving us their parts and giving us their motors, and saying they didn't, they wanted us to succeed. And you just don't find that anywhere else. You don't meet, as amazing people that can fill your gaps. That's
Yeah.
another thing that in life, nobody's good at everything. Nobody, I'm sorry. We're all good at something. And if you can find what you're good at and find people to fill in the gaps of where, you need the help, then, that's what makes a friend. That's what makes you successful. That's what best friends are. People you find and meet people that help you fill the gaps and go on to the next thing. And those are people you want to be surrounded with the rest of your life. Those are people who you want to work with. Those are people who, you know, that mean a lot to you. And,
Yeah.
you call them in the future when you've got a problem, or you're trying to figure out a solution to something, and you talk about it and you brainstorm, and those gap fillers fill the gaps, and you come up with usually the best decision and successes in the future, which
Yeah, no, it's great. We hear all the time, like one of the most common themes from BattleBots camp, but a lot of our camps, we hear like, I found my people here. Like this is where I belong. These are the folks. And whether it's a video game design course where you're getting a critique on how to make your game better from somebody because they just want it to be awesome for you and because they want you to win and they want you to be successful, or whether it's coding an app or making it some kind of awesome 3D printed object or whatever. It's unique. And I think a lot of times tech and STEM by nature can be isolating. And I think a lot of parents, they worry, they don't want their student to be in their basement until they're old, right? Like by themselves on their computer. Like these are the old stereotypes we've always heard about techie people. They're in the garage by themselves with their soldering iron. And I think what's neat about combat robotics, the team environment and getting into a community, whether it be at camp or if you're working towards a show, you get involved in a robotics competition. It takes you from just being isolated, and it kind of forces you into getting out of your shell. And sometimes the community happens to you.
yeah, it seems to take away fear too. A lot of kids are fearful of what the unknown. And these kids that go to the ID Tech camps, it takes away the fear.
Yeah.
They're not going to be afraid of changing the tire when the tire gets flat. They'll hop out of the car and say, "We'll figure it out." Maybe they've done it before, maybe they haven't, but they'll figure it out, and they'll go in there, whether they need the directions or not, or whether they just grab the jack and jack up the car and change the tire. They're not afraid to experiment with stuff. They maybe the toaster broke, maybe the something didn't work, and now they're not afraid to take it apart and look what makes it work inside. You look at your computer and all the things in there, and most people scratch their head and don't know what any of that stuff does. But a true BattleBot engineer eventually will know what every chip in that computer does. They'll know what every good ID Tech Camp Start kid will look at these things and be able to fix them themselves, or at least try, and they'll learn from that. Why is my motor making that noise in my car? And they go in there and they could monkey with it and figure it out, and say, oh, this is the problem. So
Awesome. I love it. So we're gonna go to some questions. So I've got Trey here for what, 12 more minutes? And then I'm gonna let you bounce. I'll probably tackle some of the more camp specific ones.
okay.
Uh, and some of the bot specific ones we'll do first, but we do have a good little list of um of all this stuff that all these questions have been asked. Before we do that though, in case whenever we get to the half hour marks, I know that sometimes we may lose some people, we may pick up some new. I did want to um, send a little note here to everyone. We did have a promotional code for everyone that came to this today. This is better than what you'll find on our website. This is just kind of our gift for coming, and I'm putting it in the chat, but it is a promotional code that you can use at idtech.com. We are running BattleBots camps at, I don't know, close to 75 locations this year, I think, around the country. We're in all these different states. And we would love for y'all to come. We have it for 7 to 9 year olds, 10 to 12 year olds, 13 to 18 year olds. And then we have an academy course, which is also teens, but it's a 2 week program where they get to stay and work even longer. So we will, yeah, let's go dive into some questions here. So I'm going to go with, um, man, I love some of these. Did you see, Trey? I don't know if you can see the questions or not.
Yeah, no, I can't.
Okay. There is one from somebody that was a producer at Comedy Central with you back at TV One, it says.
Okay.
And they said they were so excited to see BattleBots camp popping up since my son's really into robotics and tech. How does the camp compare to, traditional competition that you know and love? And they just asked any advice that you have for youngsters wanting to get into robotics, coding, tech, and how they get the skill set, and maybe if they even haven't can't get to a camp, like what would your advice be for that next generation?
Well, it would definitely be take the camp, because I think what you've done, Ricky, in the curriculum, which I think is huge, is there you've been able to bring it to a point where it's beginner class, at least at the start. So you brought it to a point where you don't have to know anything. You can come in and start, and over the period of time that you're there, whether it's a day, the week, the 2 weeks or whatever, you build on what you learn each day, which is the first and foremost most important part. But then not only do you teach them how to build something and drive it around and think through the process and all that, and and play and have fun, which is the most important part,
Right.
but you teach them what we're looking for in a combat robot for the television rounds, for the big boys. When you get to that point, you can experiment with your robot and come up with your ideas and figure that out. But then as you're doing that, you're thinking of what would I do, to take it to this competition. And I think one of the big things you teach is, to get people to that point where they're, thinking about their BattleBot, that what gets submitted for the TV show and compete in the TV show, which is important, because we've got hundreds and hundreds of people that want to compete in the TV show, and obviously we can't handle everybody,
Right.
for the TV rounds. So proving grounds and the face-offs and all that helps us now do that, but you're teaching them how to come up with these good ideas and add the elements that we're looking for, which I think is great.
I've got a question here that I think is awesome. We have one of our guests said, in your opinion, is it possible to make a career out of building BattleBots?
So, um, so this is a kind of a loaded question. So,
It is.
my goal, and I think a lot of contestants, goal at the beginning, when they started competing was to be able to do this. How can we do this? How I would say the majority of the contestants, when they came to BattleBots for the first time, would have loved to find a way to, make a career out of this, and get enough money from sponsors and, whatever else to figure out all the loose ends to actually do that. That being said, that hasn't really happened the way that I wish it did, and I'm sure a lot of them did. But they did. It might not be competing at BattleBots, but they did get jobs, with companies making things that they really wanted to make. I look at, Andrea with Witch Doctor, she's competed at BattleBots since a high school, all girls, Catholic schoolgirls taught by nuns into making, hands, prosthetic and robotic hands, which is something that she loves. So she turned her something that she didn't even know she wanted to do. She had no idea. She heard there was a robotics camp, and decided to, or thing at her school, decided she wanted to be in that program, made a lot of best friends and built something and competed. And, then she ends up getting a job. She goes to MIT and, or Miami. I think she went to Miami. And then ends up making cool robot parts, and she's making toys now, she's making kits, she's making all kinds of stuff that she's wanted to do. Look at Donald Hudson, with Tazbot and Dissector and all those robots from the past, worked for Qualcomm, for many years, making all kinds of things and patenting all kinds and trademarking all kinds of things that in our cell phones now. He's making drones fly around, and technology and drones that can, do themselves and fly themselves. Most of our contestants have ended up getting jobs or doing stuff in a world they didn't imagine before BattleBots. And so they did end up where they kind of wanted to. But yes, I think eventually, hopefully, if we can find a way to really excel this thing, at some point it will become I'm hoping a full-time job for a lot of these people, a professional league, if you want to call it that.
Yeah. No, that's great. I got a question here. This is from one of our 9-year-olds that is here with us today. His name's Zach. He wants to know what your favorite bot is, and I'm going to put a qualifier of it. It can't be Law Machine.
I get that question a lot. And to me, flippers, I think flippers, which is a robot that's never won before, the entire competition. It's a design that has never won, and I keep praying, and I know someday it will. Hydra's gotten really close, and I got a feeling but Hydra and Bronco, I just love those robots. It's something to me in the head. It's one thing to see Tombstone that takes this big spinning bar and stores all this kinetic energy and its speed and tries to transfer that into the other robot. That's something to be said,
Yeah.
but when a robot, moves a lever, 4 inches, I think, Hydra maybe moves 3 to 4 inches, and Bronco goes a little bit more than that, but 3 to 4 inches, Hydra moves a lever. A 250-pound robot goes into our lighting grid. So you see the lighting grid back here? Okay, that is 20 feet in the air, smashes into our roof, all moving a lever, 4 inches. That's unbelievable to me. 250 pounds flying that high in the air and come smashing back down on the ground. That's most of the time still working, sometimes not. But that's just a, amazing feat to me. And I think flippers are, someday and it'll change our event. It'll change our world if we can get a flipper and Hydra's almost there. So Terry, if you guys are listening, keep it up.
I was at a show and saw Bronco actually jump up,
Yes.
what, 2.5 feet in the air to get up on a higher level. And it was one of the highlights of anything I've ever seen. It was
Yeah.
just very shocking for everyone.
Yeah, it was something kind of unexpected when we figured it out. But yeah, every action has an opposite and equal reaction. So if you can use that, bit of physics and turn it into, you not only flips, but it flies. And it's pretty cool when you see it fly. It's not something we saw before.
I felt like a little kid when I saw it, and I was like, oh my God. Okay. So before you go, Trey, what's your favorite aspect of like BattleBots and the whole process of it? Is it the designing and prototyping? Is it the building and engineering? Is it the driving and the actual combat? What's your favorite aspect of it?
I mean, for me, I started as a driver, as a bit of, a helper engineer. But I drove Law Machine and so that communicating with a machine, using your brain, your eyes, your senses, your fingers, and transferring that into a machine, into a transmitter in that case, is amazing to me. If you've ever seen some, a person who drives a race car that really well, that's communicating with the machine really well. You've seen somebody who drives a backhoe or a loader or some sort of, tool for out on the street. The ones that can do it magically, where it's just a fluid motion and pick stuff up and move it around. Even the garbage person, that comes in and can snap your garbage and toss it in the thing and put it down and, tuck it in and all that kind of stuff. That's amazing to me. And so driving is definitely a skill that is not, people don't take that into account right away because it's something at the end after the build. Now you got to learn to drive it, and there's not always that much time for it, so that's a difficult thing. But coming up with the idea also is a big part of it, and how you
Yeah.
build it. You don't have to have fancy tools to do this. You don't, Law Machine was red wagon wheels at the beginning. We took a little thin, hard rubber wagon wheels, put a sprocket on it. We got starter motors. We didn't have a speed controller. We didn't have a real speed controller controls the speed. We had light switches. Eventually we had, but light switches would turn on the motors on and off or reverse on and off. And that's how we did it. We hooked that up to the actual servo motors that we bought with a remote control. The only thing we bought back then was a remote control. And it was made of wood. We used some aircraft aluminum, a little thin aircraft aluminum on the outside of it. And it ended up beating robots twice its weight. So, it wasn't about money. I think we spent a couple $100 that year, a lot of time, a lot of development, a lot of playing. But it just coming up with a good idea and having fun and working together, and that idea is so important. And don't be afraid to change your idea when you figure out, that's not going to work, because La Machine went through a few iterations of ideas way back when. Ginsu was one of those ones that we built that thought was a good idea at the beginning, but it's never won a fight, ever. It's but it looks scary. It's a cool
Yeah.
looking robot, just doesn't work like it's supposed to. So
All right, I got one last one for you here. Jeremiah asked, like, if you have a lot of different ideas for a robot, what's the best way to go about blending them into one robot? And I guess I would add on, is blending multiple ideas usually the best idea? Or is it better to be like a master of one thing, one main mechanism, whether it's defensive or offensive? How would
so
you, yeah.
that's an interesting question. So magic, if you want to try to learn magic, the secret to magic is learn one trick really well. If you want to learn to master, music, learn one song really well. Play the guitar in one song really well. If you can do that, then the rest of them seem to fall in a lot better. And then you can, perfect that. So start with one. I do love the robots that come with multiple attachments. I love people thinking, okay, what am I going to make, or how am I going to go against this type of robot? How am I going to go against Jameson's hammer saw? I mean, if I win BattleBots, I'm going to have to go against Jameson or a robot similar to that. How am I going to beat that? And it's different for what you're going to go against Hypershock. It's different for what you're going to go up against Huge, and all the other different robots, or the flippers or the hydras of the world. How do you beat a hydra? So having different ideas and different attachments is a great thing, but perfect the base. Perfect what your robot really is, perfect the driving of that and your communication between your driver and the robot, and flip it in every direction, because once it gets there, once you're competing with it, it's not going to be on those 2 or 4 wheels or wheel, that way that it starts off, and that wheel might be gone, so now drive it without that wheel. When I learned dirt bikes, I used to disconnect one of the brakes, ride it all day with no front brake, ride it all day with no back brake. That really teaches you how to, dirt bikes. That's all. Don't ride in the street. The street's dangerous. But, if you really want to learn to ride it, trust me, you try all that little stuff and you learn it a little bit better. If you're going to drive your robot and you really want to learn it, take a wheel off, take 2 wheels off, flip it upside down, take a wheel off. Now have it drag here or not work there, and learn about it, because there's little tricks, little things you can do. We have one of the robots at BattleBots called Overkill. That it's an old robot and it has this axe kind of big knife saw, and we can drive it 2 ways. We can flip a switch on the remote and we can drive it dual stick, right? So each stick does 1 wheel, or we can drive it with a single stick. And the reason for that is if a wheel gets knocked off or a wheel gets broken or damaged or whatever, if you're driving it single stick, you're putting that power into that wheel, and then you can catch on fire, or you're going to burn out that motor or something. If we can isolate that problem and turn that off, then that motor will be good for the next fight, and you can drive a lot better, with the single side or what you have left. So learning how to do that and practicing all that is so important to the show. And then coming up with a great idea. Just experiment and don't be afraid to change your mind. Start with as many ideas as you can. Try to build as many little ideas as you can. I think that's the beauty of ID Tech, is it gives you that time to experiment, and try different ideas. And you see what the kids are doing next to you, or who just beat you or you just beat or whatever, and say, oh, that's a good idea. Maybe I can attach it. I might win against you, but you had an idea that's very clever, and I might be able to make that idea a little bit better, and I could borrow it and experiment. And that's what life's about, is people coming up with good ideas and perfecting them.
Love it. Trey, thank you so much for joining us today. Just as just to cover us a little bit, we are not actually recommending that you take the brakes off of motorized vehicles. It's called an analogy, folks. Just kidding.
Yeah.
I'm just teasing, but no, thank you so much. And I hope this has been inspiring for folks. Trey, if you want to head out, thank you so much. I'm going to stay back. I've got some more questions, a little bit more camp specific. I'm going to stay back and answer as many of these as I can. But Trey, thank you so much. It was great having you today.
Thank you for doing it, and hope to see you at all BattleBots and come to Destructathon. And if you haven't gone to a competition, you got to come check it out. It's a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Yeah. Go to Vegas, go to camp. They're both going to be a blast.
Thank you.
Awesome. All right. And so I am going to throw in here real quick, just as we keep things moving. We did have a promotional code for anyone that came today, just as a thank you for coming. And it's just our gift. It's in the chat. If you use code AMABOTS at idtech.com, it'll give you a discount on our programs, including our BattleBots camp, which is our number one most requested course. So we're super excited about it. So yeah, I had some questions here. Someone asked a little bit about teamwork between the students, and they had a past experience with the robotics program where, one student was allowed to kind of take over the team and didn't allow input for the rest of the team. Made the experience not great for others, and I'm really sorry that happened. At ID Tech, this is something that we actively address in our training with our instructors, as well as our curriculum. So one of the cool things about ID Tech, we actually have 2 versions of each curriculum. It starts out, we actually write instructor-facing curriculum first. It has all of our notes and everything on how we expect the course to be run. And then the secondary, we remove the notes and have a kid-friendly version of them. We take it really seriously. We want the experience to be great. If we see a situation where maybe a team isn't jiving well together, we may just come up and we empower instructors to be like, hey, we're going to mix up teams today and try something new, or we'll encourage them to, hey, let's let so-and-so lead this time, or, hey, your teammate hasn't got a chance to drive yet. Let's do that for the next battle. It's something that we're constantly looking at, because, yeah, we want them to have a great time. Someone else asked about how like the groups are formed. Um, Here's what happens. A lot of times people will come with a friend to camp, or they'll come with their cousin or something like that. They're like, hey, we really want to be on a team together, and we do try to accommodate that the best we can. Otherwise, it just happens a little bit organically. We have a series of light competitions throughout the week. So like day one, we are getting a square bot made that is controllable. You know how Trey said, like, sometimes winning is being able to drive your bot. That is literally how camp starts. A typical day at ID Tech, the students arrive and then they go in and they have um, the students arrive, and we usually start with icebreakers and games and having some fun, letting the students get to know each other. Then they're going to be hearing from their instructor. We have a very like unique experience in the classroom where the students are hands-on as well as getting some verbal instruction, or maybe reading some written instructions. A lot of times we like to take the students outside of the lab to explain a concept. So maybe we're talking about how, I don't know, gravity has an impact on when something is falling. And so let's go outside and teach that. Let's go get under a tree or something, like Isaac Newton here. That's really, we want this to be an engaging experience for every student. So the students will get into groups and they'll start building together. If a group's not working well, we empower our instructors to try to fix it. A lot of times, though, these students, once they get in their first battle together, it builds this community, which is so cool. And you see their little team get going. We allow the students to actually even decorate their bots. So one of my favorite ones was Queso and Queso 2.0, which was they had a wedge robot and they decorated it to look like cheese. And so they made this robot that looked like cheese. Well, it lost a bunch and they completely reimagined their bot, Queso 2.0. And so this team, they were the Queso team. They just had a blast with it and they kept iterating and growing together. If we see that it isn't working, we would obviously make a change because we want everyone to have that magic that we're talking about. But yeah, with the teenagers and little kids, it's kind of similar. You got some people that are like, I don't want to do this part. We're going to encourage them to try it anyway. Or I only want to do this. Or like, we're going to have you do all of it. So we don't want people necessarily dominating a group or anything like that. Let's see. All right. So somebody mentioned they saw that the age range is 13 to 18, which can be a big difference. I agree. I have a 14 and a 15-year-old that are also very different, and they're only 18 months apart. And this does have one of the things that we often do, and this actually is a process we do for our overnight students. We do try to match by age when we're doing dorm rooms, and oftentimes that happens with the teams. And sometimes the 13 and 14-year-old trio of students will beat the 16 and 17-year-old students because it's not like they're physically arm wrestling. They got to get it to the bot. They've got to drive it well, compete well, battle well. So inside a course that has a blend of 13 to 18-year-olds, usually it's kind of distributed across that. And you'll see the students, they do this kind of organically, but we do also try to encourage them to be around students that, have their skill level or their similar age, similar interests. If this one group all is can't stop talking about Roblox, guess what? Y'all should have fun and be on a robotics team together, and you can talk about Roblox while you're turning wrenches, maybe do a themed bot or something like that. So we do keep it a little fluid in that sense, but we are encouraging our staff to make sure that there's never any like, okay, 18-year-old, here's your 12 and a half-year-old that you're not going to get like, that's just not our style on how we would do it. All right. We talked about groups. This is a fantastic question. Someone said they, learned about building, coding, driving. How can support a deaf child with this? This is a great question. We do have students every year that have a variety of challenges that they have to overcome in the classroom, and we really do our best to try to make it happen. I've been at a camp at our Princeton location where I've seen as an instructor had a student that was visually impaired, and they literally got these, like, they found a way to teach a student. It was Java, how to code. They were literally coding by the end of the week. We're going to be positively aggressive in trying to find solutions there. I do think with BattleBots specifically, there's certainly some communication that has to happen, but I think a lot of it can even be nonverbal. It's because we're sketching ideas when we go out to camp. Someone asked, what's Trey's favorite part of camp? I think he loved the iteration, if I could speak for him. Me personally, I like going when the kids are battling. I go over to their desks and I find their graph paper and how they've designed their bots and drawn it out. There's lots of methods for communicating, and if that's something that you want more information about, I would encourage you to reach out to our client services team. Their email address, maybe April, if you can put it in the chat, it's hello@idtech.com. And if you let us know, this is also something in our system. Once you enroll, you do have the ability to let us know, like, hey, my son is, really, really stoked about BattleBots and is probably going to be off the hook when he arrives at camp, or, they're quiet, and sometimes reserved, but they're really having, but whatever it is, they learn best in this style. Our staff get those notes so that we can make sure that the experience is awesome. Someone asked if there is a way to see progress. So throughout the week with our younger students, we do a little bit more of helping them get that information to mom and dad. They actually come home with a note card where they write what they've worked on for the day. Because sometimes you say, how was camp? And they just say, good. What'd you do today? Robots. And you're like, awesome. That's great information. And so we do try to empower younger students with that information. With the older ones, we do certainly encourage them to keep you in the loop. But what we do is at the end of the week, we have a family showcase where we bring parents into the lab. They get to see the robots, they get to see the code base that they worked on, they get to meet the instructors and see all the other students. And each instructor writes a personal message that comes with a list of transcript skills of everything they learn while they're at camp. So yeah, we definitely want to, I think proof of learning is certainly something that we take pretty seriously. Yeah, getting to know the kids, honestly, play what there's a robotics company called Sphero, and one of their mottos I've always loved, play is a powerful teacher. Seeing the students, we play games with the students a lot. Even on the first day, before we ever get onto computers, we're outside and we're playing games. We're getting to know each other. We're asking questions. Our instructors, they actually have this awesome cheat sheet of games and activities that they can pull up on their phone. That's like, hey, I've got a group of 4 and we're indoor because it's raining and all this stuff is happening. And we give them all these tools to engage with the students. And so that is absolutely something that we do to get to know the students. And then, like I said, if after the first day or so, like we feel like we need to make a change, we make a change. It's gonna, well, we want them all to be happy and satisfied. Let's see. Ooh, okay. So I will, somebody asked about Wesleyan not having a 7 to 9-year-old course. This would be a great question to send to hello@idtech.com. If there is a way for us to add it, we'll look at it. We are actually working on adjusting capacities and course mixes next week. So send it in. Also, if your student is sorry, I lost my train of thought there. If your student, the question went away. I apologize. Someone on my team made it disappear. Uh, so if anyone on my team wants to unmute and tell me what that question was again, I'll gladly finish it. I'm gonna keep moving though. Um, Actually, I think we got most of them.
I can read the question to you, Ricky. Sorry, that was me. That was me. About the 7 and 9 year old.
Oh,
And
Wesleyan.
yes,
Thank
for
you.
Westland. Yes. Sorry,
Yes.
Ricky.
Yes. And also, I don't know exactly what age your 9-year-old is. That is something if you contact hello at, if there is a way for them to potentially be in a 10-year-old course, it's something we could consider. I don't want to promise it, but it is something that if we talk about it, we can have that conversation. Our client services team is awesome at this, and we will we'll definitely get that taken care of. All right. Um, I think that's it. I want to thank you all for coming and all of your questions. I'm going to throw the code in here one more time, just kind of our gift today. But thank you so much for coming. If you're interested, we do have more webinars coming up on different topics, like more generally about camp. We have some that are teen program ones. We've had some specific to our Costa Rica program. Um, Check out idtech.com/webinars if you want to look for those. But yeah, there's a code. It's good through Sunday, and we can't wait to see your students come battle with us this year. We're gonna have a blast. It's gonna be really fun. All right. Goodbye, everyone.